The first time I caught HOA Karen photographing my dogs through our hedges, I thought it was just another petty power move, one more thing to add to the long list of grievances she kept like a trophy case. It was a Saturday so bright it felt like the sun had opinions, and I was out back tossing a chewed-up tennis ball for Goose and Maple, my two mutts with faces like saints and the energy of pinballs. Goose is a stoic shepherd mix with two different colored eyes that make him look like he's always asking the truth of things. Maple is half lab, half question mark, with a cinnamon coat and an instinct to sit on your feet right when you need to move. The ball arced, the dogs skidded on grass, and then the air changed small, sharp, like a mosquito you suddenly notice in your ear. The sound was a phone camera shutter, rapid fire. I turned. Karen stood on the sidewalk, shoulder wedged against her beige SUV. Sunglasses so big they looked like small shields. She had her phone raised high like a badge, posture taut with that particular righteousness that blooms in brittle people when they think they've caught you. She waved a printed letter at me like a matador's cape. "You're in violation," she declared. "Your dogs exceed the permitted weight limit for domestic pets per HOA rules, and one of them is a restricted breed." Maple flopped on her belly and sighed. Goose dropped the ball at my toes and stared up like, "Say the word and I'll fetch your sunglasses instead." I walked to the low picket gate, set my palms on it, and met Karen's glare. "There is no breed restriction in our bylaws," I said, keeping my voice level. "And there's no weight limit either. We've lived here 3 years. You know that." She smiled, the brittle kind. "We had an emergency board session last night. New addendum, to protect the community." She handed me a paper with the ink still slightly warm, like it had been rushed through a printer that didn't get to cool down. The letter had my name on it, my lot number, and a threat of daily fines if my dogs weren't rehomed within 72 hours. Felt like someone had slid ice through my ribs. "Rehomed," I repeated. "Those are family. They are registered, vaccinated, and they've never hurt anyone." "Potential is enough," she said. "And I have witnesses that they bark past 10 p.m. They bark at coyotes and the wind chimes you make your neighbor take down every spring," I said. "That's not a crime." She lifted her chin. "Rules are rules." That day cracked open something in me I hadn't used since the years when my dad was sick and I had to pick fights with insurance hold lines until I got a human being who wouldn't hang up. I took the letter and said nothing, which Karen took for obedience. She swanned off, smug in the way only people can be when they think their will is the weather. I stood there with the paper trembling in my hand and Goose nudging my knee like a friend. I knew I wasn't going to comply. I also knew I wasn't going to lose my dogs to a woman who made empathy a sport she never practiced. I read the bylaws again that night, every line I'd skimmed when we moved in, every clause that had been weaponized into a culture. There was no breed or weight restriction, none. The addendum she flaunted had no signatures from a quorum, no notice period, no vote, just the shaky scrawl of a woman who believed her signature could conjure law. I printed the original bylaws, highlighted the relevant sections, and placed them in a bright red folder like a flare. I also printed copies of Goose and Maple's licenses, vet records, and a letter from their trainer because of course Karen would call them dangerous. She called a toddler's bubble wand visual clutter that same spring. The second act of this war began 2 mornings later, at 6:42 a.m., with metal clanks and a bulldog growl of a voice. I came out still tying my robe belt to find a private security contractor standing in my driveway with a clipboard, a tape measure, and a body camera like he was an astronaut and my yard was Mars. Karen was with him in heels and a blazer over a motivational t-shirt that read, "We don't accept excuses. Per HOA order," she said. "We're here to verify the height of your fence and the measurements of your dogs." "The measurements of my dogs? We'll be weighing them." Maple cocked her head like she understood every word and was personally offended. Goose leaned against my thigh, heavy and warm. "You step foot through that gate, and I call the police," I said. "You don't have authority to seize property or weigh beings." The security guard glanced at Karen, whose lips flattened. "We're not seizing," she snapped. "We're enforcing. We'll document excessive barking, signage, droppings, and any aggressive postures. The board has received multiple complaints." That was new. Complaints? I looked past her to see the neighbor across the street, Mr. Calhoun, 75 and lonely, watching from his porch with his hands around a mug. He mouthed I didn't and shook his head. Karen saw the gesture and turned her back to him like cutting off a supply line. This is your last warning, she said. Tomorrow the fines start. $100 a day. After 7 days, we will escalate to animal control. I took out my phone and hit record. Please repeat that last sentence, I asked evenly. Why? Because you just threatened to weaponize a public agency to take my dogs without cause, and I'd like a record for the county. She scoffed, but I watched the pulse knead at her neck. Do what you want, she said. We will. When they left, something else arrived, Maya. Her appearance was a twist so sharp I almost laughed. She's the new neighbor 3 doors down, the one who runs 3 miles at dawn and plants milkweed for monarchs. I didn't know until that day that she is also a former city attorney who left the job to take care of her mom. She walked into my yard with a canvas tote stuffed with public records and the calm of someone who has met bullies at the end of their leash. I heard her threaten animal control, she said softly. I used to advise the municipal bureau. Most homeowners think animal control is an extension of the HOA. It's not. It's law enforcement for living things. There are rules. There's due process. She splayed papers across my patio table and pointed to sections like a map. No new rule is enforceable without proper notice and vote. No animal can be deemed dangerous on rumor. And if an HOA representative falsifies complaints to trigger an investigation, that's fraud. She looked up at me and smiled with absolutely no fear. If she calls them, we answer the door with everything ready. We ask for the case number, and we show them this. She tapped her tote. And we bring a camera. I hadn't realized how much I was bracing until then. Relief rolled through me like a shoulder I nodded. Why are you helping? I asked. Because she told my kid to muzzle her laughter at the pool last week, Maya said, eyes flashing. Because she's been telling people my dog, Clover, is a pit bull when she's a terrier mix who sleeps with a stuffed broccoli. Because I'm tired of watching women like her invent rules to make their world smaller. She grinned. Also because I like your dogs. We set up. YouTube lawyers would have been proud. I mounted a doorbell camera that looked straight down the front walk and set an extra on the gate. I posted a small wooden sign I burned with a pyrography pen the night before. Hands off our dogs. Not the screaming kind of sign, just a line in the sand written in hope. I placed the red folder on a table by the door and the vet records beside it. I trained Goose and Maple to sit on a rug and wait for a release command with as much dignity as 2 wiggly joys could manage. And then we waited. Animal control did come, but not the way Karen expected. It was a Wednesday when the white county SUV rolled up and the officer stepped out, a woman with sun-cracked forearms and a voice that suggested she had seen more kindness in animals than people. She knocked, and I answered with a breath I tried not to make obvious. Hi, she said, glancing at her tablet. We received multiple complaints regarding aggressive dogs, excessive barking, and a threat to public safety at this address. I'm Officer Tilda Reyes. Can I speak with you about the allegations and meet your dogs? Of course, I said. This is Maya, my neighbor and counsel. Everything's being recorded. Officer Reyes nodded, not bothered. Everything I do is recorded, she said, tapping her body camera. Can I see the dogs? I led her in. Goose and Maple stayed on their rug like their Olympic trials depended on it. Maple thumped her tail once, then froze as if remembering her job. Goose watched Officer Reyes with that mismatched gaze that tends to rearrange people's assumptions. The officer crouched, hand out, body turned sideways in deference. She had good dog manners. Maple oozed like syrup toward her hand and pressed her head into the officer's palm. Goose sniffed her boot, decided she was noble, and gave her a slow blink of benediction. These are not aggressive animals, Officer Reyes said, almost to herself. She stood and took the folder I offered. She read the trainer's letter, the license renewals, the microchip info, and the HOA letter that wasn't a letter so much as a tantrum dressed in Times New Roman. And you're saying there's no enacted bylaw that limits weight or breed? She asked. Maya slid a copy across the table like a magician's proof. Notice, vote, signatures,